Welcome back. The World Bank Group member IFC has issued $30 million in 15-year Masala Bonds or rupee-denominated bonds. This marks the longest-dated offshore rupee bond which has been issued so far. The issuance will be listed on the London Stock Exchange, and proceeds of the bonds will be used to advance private sector development in India. The International Finance Corporation, or IFC, has previously issued Masala bonds in maturities of 3, 5, 7 and 10 years, but this is the longest tenure of 15 years. And now we are being joined by a guest who's the Treasurer and the Vice President of IFC, Jing Donghua, to talk about the Masala bond issuance and how it's doing. Mr. Hua, what's the total volume of Masala bonds issued so far? Is it substantial enough to warrant a market?
No, indeed. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm calling in from New York City. Very, very excited. Since we launched the program at the World Bank annual meeting in 2013, we have now issued over 110 billion Indian rupee, or about $2 billion in the offshore Masala Bonds program, as you indicated, from 3-year all the way to 15-year. Now, what we'd like to do with our pioneering program is really to demonstrating that given this market volatility, there is very strong international investor interest in Indian rupee-denominated investment opportunities. So IFC is very, very glad to be able to play this role, catalyzing and connecting international savings to infrastructure financing in India.
Okay.
So the latest 15-year is quite interesting because if you could imagine that, investors are very jittery.
Okay.
Normally they want to stay very short. But I think, the fact that we have investors who are willing to buy 15-year Indian rupee Masala bonds is really a great indication of the
No, I take your point. Mr. Hua, but $30 million is not a great deal of money. And did you say 110 billion rupees? Even that, pales in comparison to the kind of Indian bonds that Indian companies raise in India, which was something like 4 trillion rupees last year. Now, with this smaller size, is there a market, or is it largely held to maturity?
Yes, let me just make clear the bond is 2 billion Indian rupee, the latest one, 30 million US dollar. Well, it has to start somewhere. The Masala bond is a new asset class for Indian rupee, just like the dim sum for Chinese yuan.
Yeah.
If you go back less than a decade ago.
Does it get traded, or is it just held to maturity by the buyers so far? The 3, the 5, 7, 10 10-year bonds that have issued so far. Were they traded at all?
Indeed. I think most of them are real asset, managers. They are holding on to their bond. We haven't seen too much secondary market trading. But as you implied, as the market deepens and as the Indian corporate sector starts to issue, just like what we have seen in the dim sum market for Chinese yuan, it will become a viable and vibrant, alternative and important funding source for Indian companies.
What's the cost? What's the interest rate?
So the yield on the bond is 7.1%, which is about 90 basis points, 0.9% below Indian government.
Okay.
This is simply because we are an international AAA rated institution. Therefore, international investors are already very familiar with our name and trust our name. And this is where we play this catalytic role, right? To get people interested in this asset class. As they become much more interested, certainly they would demand...
And typically, which companies have been funded with this money?
Sorry, say that again.
Typically, you have given this money to what kind of companies?
Yeah, so far we have invested in about 11 projects using the proceeds,
Okay.
Including microfinancing, including infrastructure bonds, and green Masala Bonds, which we have supported the Yes Bank program domestically. So,
all right. All right, I see your point.
Really
I see your point, Mr. Hua. You have to make a beginning somewhere, and if the money is cheaper than government of India coupon, then clearly it's quite a steal for Indian companies as well. One hopes, of course, that the size and the interest will increase. Thank you very much for joining us with all those details on Masala Bonds.